When the government of Israel paves a road in Area C on Israeli state land, that will appear on the United Nations website as trespass and violation of Palestinian territory, because they consider every inch of Judea and Samaria to be occupied Palestinian territory. And so if Israel puts down an electrical pole or paves a road, that is trespass on Palestinian property. If you are, for example, a law-abiding citizen in Kansas City, you are 300 times more likely to be the victim of violent crime than you are if you're an Arab living in Area C of Judea and Samaria. You can be a lot of things without land. You can be a nation, which we've been for thousands of years. You can be a religion, a people, but you can't be a country, you can't be an actual state without land.
Welcome to a special edition of the Israel Guys. We're here with Naomi Kahn from Regavim today, and we're talking about settler violence. Guys, you hear about settler violence in the mainstream media. You see it probably every day. If you're watching the mainstream media, you see videos on social media. This is a massive topic, but the reality of what's happening, boots on the ground, is very, very different from what you have seen and heard. And today, we're not just going to talk about it. We're not going to speculate. We're going to get into the facts and the data. And that's what Naomi's here with us for today. Thank you so much for being with us. Pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
So Regavim, and you could talk a little bit about Regavim, but Regavim is one of the only NGOs that I know of that is operating in Judea and Samaria that's, let's say, pro-Israel. Maybe you know the number, but last I heard there was hundreds of NGOs that are operating against Israel, specifically in Judea and Samaria. And Regavim is one lone voice that's standing against that tide. So before we dive into the 125-page report that you put together about settler violence, tell us a little bit about Regavim.
Well, Regavim is dedicated to protecting Israel's land resources. Really, the most basic resource that a country has is the land. You can be a lot of things without land. You can be a nation, which we've been for thousands of years. You can be a religion, a people, but you can't be a country. You can't be an actual state without land. So that's your most basic resource. And really, the decisions about how that land resource is used, for what purposes, what we give to the next generation, how we build our country, really is the most basic expression of a nation's sovereignty, those land policy decisions. So our mission is to protect that land resource as an expression of Israel's sovereignty. So we work from the ground up. But this brings us to a lot of other issues. The issue that we're going to talk about today is actually quite different than our usual area of research and activism. But it is similar in a very important way. And that is, what we do is all data-based. We deal with facts. We don't deal with prophecies, and we don't deal with promises. We deal with actual facts and law. So we began to see a preponderance of things that intersected the intersection of this land policy issue and the question of settler violence in Judea and Samaria. And it forced us to take a long, hard look. But Regavim applied to this issue the same methods that we use in every other issue. And that is, first of all, get the facts and let the facts speak. Don't decide what they're going to tell you. Look and see what they say, and then try to get a bigger picture and address that bigger picture.
I was just going to say that I think the world of Regavim and the work you're doing in that you are taking that real data. Luke and I, we've seen here where the cameras line up just correct, just to get their story that they have to tell. And in order to get their story, boy, does that angle have to be just right. And boy, do they have to have the right players just in the right way and set that set just perfectly to make the CNN news flash that sells around the world. That's the opposite of Regavim.
Yes.
You've led tours all over Judea, Samaria. You've been to those trash deposits in nature reserves that are like, what's going on? I mean, you guys do tons of work within that. Like, you're talking about the land. How is people abusing the land? These Bedouin issues in the south, the Arab issues around Judea and Samaria, and also to respect, just to lay some more foundation for this incredible release of this project you've just done here. you guys are very professional. You have lawyers. Your team is a team of lawyers, researchers, and field scouts, which is just amazing. If I was to just think of Regavim, you really got the right team for this job. And it's one thing if the world would just listen to you, I think we would have peace in the Middle East. With just it would just be like that.
Yeah.
Like you're dealing with the raw data. So
I
without
think-
further ado, there's so much to dive
Well, I
into.
know
here.
most people are used to, we live in an age of social media and short attention spans. People are used to interpreting current events through emotions and feelings. But at some point, if you really want to know the truth and get down to what's actually happening, you have to get to the facts and the data. And what does Ben Shapiro say? Facts don't care about your feelings, right? Isn't that the quote?
One last thing, Luke, is Regavim. I remember this video stands out to me about your team. Your researchers on the ground, literally going out with drones to get capture footage of whatever the big issue of the day is, whether that's a takeover or land takeover, if that's a abuse of land or whatever it is. Literally one of your researchers out trying to get this drone shot of this relatively delicate area, and he's getting shot at.
Correct.
This was just not that long ago.
Correct.
What is it?
Not that
even
long
a year
ago. Yeah.
So anyway, just to say, cutting edge information that's going to be here as we talk about this settler violence, the
Correct.
most demonized. Talk about the people that are just trying to make Israel look like just literal demons, like the demonization of Israel
Correct.
is being shut down.
Well, and I think why this
by
topic is important right
content.
now is because the supposed settler violence was in the news again a couple of weeks ago.
Right. Yeah.
We were talking about before we turned the cameras on that it feels like the left is getting scared because there is so much growth happening in Judea and Samaria. We've got a very pro-Judea and Samaria government in the Knesset right now. All of the Likud ministers and a bunch of other Knesset members signed a letter asking Netanyahu to apply sovereignty in Judea and Samaria
Correct.
within the next couple of weeks. So there's a lot of support. So maybe the left is getting very scared. So we're going to be talking about this report. And if I understand correctly, you were the main author of this.
One of the authors, yeah.
I just want to show the camera. This is a serious report, and I think we can link in the description below so people can get it. I thought this was a good quote, though, from the report to start off with, that you say there's a one-sided and biased campaign heavily promoted by its proponents, which claims that Israeli settlers systematically and deliberately engage in widespread violence against Palestinian residents and their property in various forms. So this is the narrative that the world's believing. This is the narrative the mainstream media is believing, that there are thousands of extremist radical settlers, and we've all seen their pictures, wild hair and long beard and peyote, and and then they're every day they're engaging in acts of violence against the Palestinians and their property.
And it's not just the narrative and that image that's what has really powered this campaign is that it is purportedly based on data, which is really what made us jump to attention, because that's our gear house. Really, that's where we live. What's the data? So anyone who's interested, this is it.
Yeah, let's get into it. Yeah.
So, and I just, before we dive into that, I just want to add one more thing. It's not just that the left is running scared. It's that this narrative, which has been in the works and has been building steam for years, and we've been tracking it for years, has really serious real world consequences right now. We're talking about arms embargoes by our purported allies in a time of war based on this narrative. We're talking about international criminal charges against Israelis, individuals, members of government, and the country as a whole. We're talking about serious, big picture, real world fallout from this narrative. So the narrative is based purportedly on data. And that data, where did it come from?
Right. That was my question.
Where does the data come from?
Putting this out?
We know where it ends up, and that is in the hands of, for example, the United States government, the European Union, all sorts of very big players on the scene. So we wanted to get our hands on that data. So the first place to look is the United Nations. They have what's called the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Occupied Palestinian Territories, OCHA in short. And if you look that up, you go onto their website and you can see they have this dashboard of violence in the occupied Palestinian territories. And they divide these things up. You can filter by date, by region, by victim, by perpetrator. So they have Palestinian casualties, Palestinian fatalities, Israeli casualties, and Israeli fatalities. And they give numbers. And those numbers are shocking, and those numbers are frightening, and those numbers are terrible. And we wanted to know more. Where did they get those numbers? How is all of this reported? So the first thing you do is read the page, and it says some things that really sounded the alarm for us. The first thing that it says is, who is a Palestinian casualty? It includes Palestinians who are harmed or killed while in the act of committing terror attacks against Jews. Those are considered victims of settler violence. Right?
So
If an Arab terrorist trying to murder a Jew is harmed in the process, he's listed as a casualty or fatality of settler violence.
Oh my
Right?
gracious.
Right.
That's the UN definition.
UN definition. It's on the
all right.
page. Look it up for yourselves. OCHA's casualty dashboard, it's called.
We'll be right back with the rest of today's interview, but first I want to give you something practical that you can do to support Israel. If you, like many people that I know, love Israel, but you aren't able to make it over here to the Holy Land, or if you're just inspired by the Jewish families living out God's promises on the front lines, or if you simply want to walk out God's words to Abraham in Genesis 12 of blessing the nation of Israel, then you need to check out our friends over at blessedbyisrael.com, blessedbyisrael.com. What these guys do is they bring the amazing, beautiful boutique products from families in the biblical heartland of Israel to people all around the world. From the land of Israel straight to your doorstep, you can enjoy awesome products like extra virgin olive oil, coffee roasted to perfection by Agro Cafe, which I absolutely love, and I drink more than 1 cup a day here in the office, delicious raw honey, jewelry, organic spices, handcrafted ceramics, and much, much more. And they're all from wonderful small family-owned businesses in Israel. Be a part of encouraging and investing in the people of Israel and enjoy high-quality products at the same time. Head over to blessedbyisrael.com to purchase beautiful boutique products and make your impact today. Use the code INVEST for $5 off your first order at blessedbyisrael. That's blessedbyisrael.com. You can also find the link in the description below. Now, back to the rest of today's interview.
As we go through this, and you can come up with some of these too, I want to bring this to the real world for people. If you're in America, basically this would be the equivalent of saying a police officer is a violent, what could we equate this to? Like a violent civilian because he, stopped an act of terrorism or an act of murder or something like that.
Correct.
Like that's,
Correct.
with an IDF soldier, or an Israeli police officer, or even a civilian stops an act of terrorism, then they're labeled as a
Violent settler.
Which to that point, not to off-rail us here, but the BLM, Black Lives Matter campaigns were very connected to the Palestinian issues here.
Absolutely.
You guys have done work on that. That's
Absolutely.
incredibly connected. So good point, Luke. I think that actually drives this whole thing home is that the entities are very connected.
Correct. So we saw this on the dashboard, on the front page. Most people don't bother to read the print underneath these very interesting graphics on their page. And we said, we really need to learn more about this. How many incidents were there? They report thousands of incidents, violent incidents, and we wanted to know what they were. So on the side of this very same page, it says, click here for the full data set, meaning all the incident reports of all of these violent incidents. And we did. And it said, you can only have access to these data if you are a vetted humanitarian organization. And we said, oh, okay, how do you become a vetted humanitarian organization? And they said, well, we'll decide if you're a vetted humanitarian organization. In other words, we're not sharing our data with you. But they said, well, you need to trust us because all of the incident reports are verified. They come from 2 independent and unbiased sources. Every single incident report that is included in the database.
Did you figure out who those unbiased sources were?
They wouldn't tell us who those. And so what we did was kind of a James Bond type of maneuver. What we did was we reached out to a European postdoctoral researcher on criminology. And we said, we're interested in this data, and this is very, very important in terms of understanding criminal behavior and nationalist motivated crime. And this researcher reached out to the United Nations Organization for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and asked for the data set. And lo and behold, got it. And lo and behold, shared it with us. We got 10 years worth of data that covered more or less, well, almost 10 years worth. We narrowed it down to the the data that was most carefully documented, because in 2017 they began uploading earlier incidents, but we took from 2017 through 2023 because that was carefully documented. And we went through 8,332 lines of incident reports. And we looked for various things. First of all, we looked for the sources, who was reporting. And in the overwhelming majority of reports, there weren't two independent or unbiased sources. There was only one source. Sometimes that same one source was listed under two different names. But that one source was almost inevitably essentially the equivalent of the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, right? It's the same thing in Judea and Samaria. It was reported by the Palestinian Authority's Ministry for Resistance to the Occupation.
Oh my gracious!
Right, and that
unbiased,
was their
for sure.
There was their unbiased,
right.
independent source of information. Overwhelmingly, that is what
Opposing
these reports.
the IDF.
In other words,
Now-
the ministry that hates Israel, or
Correct,
the
and
ministry,
it exists in order to get all Jewish life out of Judea and Samaria.
Well, it sounds like a terrorist organization, if you ask me.
Well, it certainly is, and we have another report all about that, the Palestinian Authority's direct involvement in terrorism.
So you're having the
However-
terrorists count the numbers,
Correct.
just like what we have in
Correct.
Gaza with the counting the
Absolutely.
death fatalities. And
But that isn't even
Pushing
the
it up.
worst part of this report.
okay, sounds like I don't know how you get worse.
It's pretty bad.
Right? Yeah.
But we looked at every single one of those 8,332 lines of incident reports, and we found that 98% of them either had nothing to do with settlers, or had nothing to do with violence, or didn't occur in Judea and Samaria.
Okay,
Right?
so let's boil that down. If there's
98%.
Yeah,
Correct.
I don't.
Of the remaining number of incident reports, we went through them all. Right. So what are those? What did that 98% involve? It was confrontations either with the IDF or the Israel police.
Not with a settler.
Not with
But people
not
have to
with a
understand
civilian, not
that
with
the
a settler.
Arabs in Gaza,
They
just like
consider
when they
all
came
of
from,
us. They
if
consider
you're a
all of us
Jew
settlers.
living in Israel, you're a settler.
Correct.
Doesn't matter if you're in Tel
Correct.
Aviv.
So they talk about settler demonstrations in Tel Aviv and in Ramat Gan, and settlers in everywhere.
And settlers are the ones who wear the green IDF uniform. Settlers are the wearing
Correct.
the police. They're driving the police car.
And
The
what you'll
settler,
find,
if you're a Jew.
correct. If you look on, for example, on B'Tselem's website, where a lot of these same incidents are reported, or they are one of the sources of information, and we'll get to that in a moment. But what you'll see over and over again is they report things like settlers dressed as soldiers, or settlers accompanied by soldiers. Now, who are the soldiers in the IDF?
The citizens of
Citizens,
Israel.
right.
They're
Yeah.
citizens of
Army.
Israel. So
Right.
we are all settlers, ergo, all soldiers are settlers. So we have this kind of circularity here that we're talking about, but it gets even worse. An incredible number of the reports of settler violence in this database that we received listed things like storming Al-Aqsa, which means every time a non-Muslim goes up to the Temple Mount legally during the permitted visiting hours, does nothing confrontational, there is no incident to report, that is reported as settler violence, as Jews storming the Al-Aqsa compound.
Let's make it even better just a minute here, because Luke, you
Christians.
and I are a part of that
Correct.
number.
You are settler
We're
violence
definitely,
right
because
here.
we've had moments where I've been grabbed and thrown off the mount. I was spit on and been pushed and been attacked by Muslims on the Temple Mount before. This was back in the day when it was really bad, back
Yeah.
in 2013 timeframe.
Mhm.
So we're
But
definitely.
you're saying like
You're
it
in there.
could just be somebody visiting the Temple Mount. It doesn't have to
Absolutely.
be a confrontation with
No
the
confrontation whatsoever.
or the Israeli
they count
police.
how many times people entered the Al-Aqsa compound, the courtyard, and they list every single one of those as an incident of settler violence, which is how they can say settler violence is rising because more and more people are going up to the Temple Mount.
What was it last year? It was like 70,000. Big number.
I
can't
don't know
remember
the
exactly.
number. I know that there were a
Large.
lot.
Yeah.
So
those are all counted as settlers attacking Arabs because
Correct.
they walked onto the Temple Mount,
Correct.
the ancient site of the Jewish temple,
correct.
all the way back to the time of Solomon.
Yes.
If you're a Jew, you're not allowed to walk.
You're not allowed
peacefully.
to.
the holiest
Correct.
site in Judaism.
Correct.
Right.
Now, there are other things that are probably even more ridiculous. When the government of Israel paves a road in Area C on Israeli state land, that will appear on the United Nations website as trespass and violation of Palestinian territory, because they consider every inch of Judea and Samaria to be occupied Palestinian territory. And so if Israel puts down an electrical pole or paves a road, that is trespass on Palestinian property.
So
and
explain
it
that
appears in the
further,
report.
Because the state of Israel just had a huge budget. You drove here today. You drove on a road that was just freshly
Correct.
done. It looks amazing, right? Like
Right.
it's a huge now, amazing.
Well, not
all
only
the
that,
Arabs
but they're
drive
also
on it.
expanding all the way to Jerusalem now.
Right.
Yes, and they're
So
expanding
that
the
is
road.
all trespassing.
Correct.
And the Arabs use that road. They don't pay for that road,
Absolutely.
but
Of
they
course.
use that road that Israel is building with Israeli
Absolutely.
tax dollars, and now they're using it by calling it trespassing to the international community.
Correct.
Your report even mentions hikers. Is that also
Correct. If a class trip of elementary school kids is taken out to see ancient Shiloh, that's settler violence.
No, actually,
I just want to make sure people understand too, because
you got to be kidding. That's probably
Absolutely.
the most far-fetched.
you mentioned Area C, like on all of this, all of these acts of settler violence of hikers and expanding the roads are in Area C. So people know, like the Oslo Accords, you have A, B, and C. There could be a case where it's like you're going into Area A and you're doing something like maybe it's understandable.
Nope.
Area C is Israeli state land,
Correct.
fully controlled
Correct.
by Israel, intended for Israel, signed and sealed
And
for
I'll
Israel.
add to all of that, all of this nonsense, that there isn't one single report in all of those 8,332 incident reports that reports some sort of Israeli or settler violence in areas under Palestinian Authority jurisdiction. Israelis simply do not violate those lines. The other,
right.
in the other direction, that is obviously not the case.
Now, okay, a question, because if they're trying to correlate that there's a radical violent settlers, is there in any of those, obviously you've kind of torn this whole thing apart already. The UN is, nobody should trust the UN as far as they can throw them. Was there any reports that would validate out of the entire thing? Because this is what people need to know. Is there a speck of truth? Is there even one incident?
So your report says
Unfortunately, yes.
833 incidents
There
were
were
actually
800
classified.
Because we have
Correct.
destroyed this.
But let's
this
break
thing.
that down.
But
Break
break
that
it
down
down just
even
to be
more for us.
completely honest
Yes.
with everybody. And obviously, I have my thoughts on this already, but I'd rather hear from you.
So there are unfortunately incidents of violence among the Jewish community in Judea and Samaria. There are incidents of violence in every human society on planet
Let's not
Earth.
talk about Chicago.
Correct. If you are, for example, a law-abiding citizen in Kansas City, you are 300 times more likely to be the victim of violent crime than you are if you're an Arab living in Area C of Judea and Samaria.
Hey, say that again so
That's an
people
incredible
understand.
fact.
There is violence in every human community. There is violence among the Jewish community in Judea and Samaria. No one is condoning it. No one is supporting it. Everyone is condemning it. The government of Israel has invested millions in trying to educate against it, trying to prevent it, and trying to bring those who are involved in violence to justice. But the question isn't whether or not there is violence. The question is how prevalent that violence is, and whether or not the Israeli authorities are doing what they're supposed to be doing to stop it.
So basically, you just said how much more likely is it in Kansas City? How much more dangerous is it to live in Kansas City?
300 times more likely to be a victim of violent crime in Kansas City. And I chose Kansas City simply because it has the same size population, about 500,000 people.
Not to mention it's like the Midwest. It should be a
Yeah.
pretty safe
It
area.
should
Most
be.
people would
I'm
not think of it
talking
as a
about
dangerous area.
Inner city Detroit. I'm not
Not
talking about
Chicago,
any of
yeah.
these other places. And
Have
those
you-
have different dynamic, but I'm talking about a similar sized and socioeconomically diverse population. You're 300 times more likely to be the victim of a violent crime in Kansas City than you are if you're an Arab living in Area C under Israeli jurisdiction.
If I was to do this math just to the top of my head here real quickly, that would make Judea and Samaria one of the safest places on earth.
In fact, the Jewish communities of Judea and Samaria are among the most the rate of crime in these communities is the lowest in Israel. We checked against government statistics for every other community in Israel. We checked against other sectors. And that is an amazing thing, simply when you put it in the context of the level of violence to which these people are subjected. Because we also looked at the statistics of how much Arab nationalist motivated crime there is in Judea and Samaria in Area C.
Right.
How often are Jews subjected to murderous terrorism on the part of these same people? And I don't have to tell you, it's off the charts.
We all know people.
Yeah, correct. There isn't anybody in the country who doesn't know people. Everyone is affected by it. Everyone is under siege. And still, the Jewish communities almost completely do not engage in retaliatory violence or violence of any kind. This is actually the lowest crime of any kind anywhere in the country. And I certainly don't want to compare it to American communities because it won't look good for American communities.
So can we break down this number of, like, let's keep getting down to the nitty gritty here. You have, and we're talking about an 9-year period of this report. 833 incidents were classified as settler violence against Palestinian Judea and Samaria that resulted in bodily harm. Let's break that down some more for us.
So the first thing that you have to keep in mind is of those 833 incidents, they include incidents that were instigated by Arab violence, meaning if there's a confrontation, if there's a stone throwing incident, if there's whatever, and a Palestinian Arab is harmed.
Meaning tear gas? What if they added that?
No, because civilians don't use tear gas. So,
well, no, but they call the IDF and the
exactly.
Police,
so if there are civilians involved, meaning if an Israeli is attacked and calls the armed forces in, and as a result, an Arab is harmed in any way, that is listed. Correct? So if there's a confrontation and nobody can actually determine who started it, that is also part of the statistics. But we decided to try to go a little bit deeper and understand that those 833 incidents. And the way we wanted to do that was to compare it to Israeli statistics, Israeli incident reports on the same dates in the same places. So we went to the Israel police and we asked them for the data. And we went, of course, to the Israeli equivalent of the FBI, which is the Shin Bet or the Shabak, and we asked them for data. And of course, neither one of those Israeli authorities was willing to share that data, and it's completely not transparent. We actually filed a Freedom of Information petition, and we forced the Israel police to hand over the data, those incident reports, and we compared them. Oh, yes, we did.
That's a part of this.
Indeed, it is.
Well done.
So we didn't want to just. We wanted to do two things. We wanted to first see what they were reporting, and that's ridiculous enough. And then the ones that were left over that we couldn't discount right off the bat, we wanted to see how the other side reported that exact same incident. So we compared the dates and times for many, many, many of these incidents, and we found that what was reported were actually acts of self-defense or acts in which there are some bizarre ones in there. For example, a Palestinian laborer working in a Jewish community in Judea and Samaria. I can't remember which one right now. I believe it was in the Gush Etzion area. He was actually bitten by a dog, and that was listed as settler violence.
The violent settler dog.
Yeah, the violent settler dog. Car accidents in which Palestinians and Israelis are involved and a Palestinian Arab is harmed, they consider that settler violence. So, for example, I, 3 months ago, exactly to the day, got rear-ended by a Palestinian Arab with an Israeli license plate. It's an interesting conversation in and of itself. And I had to have surgery, have all the bones in my hand redone. And that is a settler violence incident because I'm a settler. And there was obviously, actually
and
not.
And they ran into you.
He ran into me. Yeah. I was standing still and he hit me from behind and totaled my car. But that's settler violence. And you see reports like this all the time. If you compare the incident report, vehicular ramming involving a settler and a Palestinian, but you look at the Israel police report, you see that it was simply a traffic accident. And these things happen in human society. There are traffic accidents, unfortunate but true. The fact is that it's not nationalist motivated. It wasn't in this case either. But the reporting, the use that is being made of this data is extremely political. Yes. And they also, at the same time, drastically deflate the reports of Arab violence against Jews. If you look at that very same United Nations database, their dashboard, the number of Israeli fatalities, casualties, violent incidents is minuscule. And we know
Are they
that
not
that is
even taking into account the actual acts of terrorism that took Israeli lives? Is that not even mentioned on there?
very, very, they say it can't be confirmed. They don't know who the perpetrator was, all sorts of things. The numbers are ridiculous. Now, there's another problem, and that is when we got the Israeli police reports and the Shin Bet reports on those incidents, there's a tremendous lack of it's not just that it's not transparent, it's that you can't compare them because the Israel police reports only report successful Arab attacks.
Right.
Meaning if an Arab threw a Molotov cocktail at my car as I was driving home, but he missed, it doesn't appear anywhere. So, and there are, we have first responder reports from Rescuers Without Borders. They list every single incident, even when there was no damage or casualties. And there are tens of thousands of them that don't appear in the police reports, and they certainly don't appear on the United Nations reports. So again, the Jewish communities of Judea and Samaria are victimized constantly, bombarded constantly by Arab terrorism and violence. And in response, the level of violence perpetrated by Jews, although it is unfortunately not zero, and it should be, and we're working on getting it to zero, it is so small as to be off the charts in comparison.
Is there a percentage, a number that you could say, or is it just it's not measurable? It's like we have. In comparison to the number of people in the population, it's something like 0.056, something like that. It's amazing.
Really, it's ridiculous.
So
it's
what we're talking about is
again,
flip.
It's a complete flip. I'll also add that some of the violence incidents or the investigations that are initiated by the police for the Judea and Samaria region include things that have nothing to do with Arabs. We're talking about drugs or theft or vandalism that are not nationalist and have, so those numbers are very, very hard to correlate. But even if you count all of those things, still the percentages are way below Israel's national average, certainly way below the averages for the Arab community, either in Israel or in Judea and Samaria, and far below what, unfortunately, Americans have become accustomed to.
Wait, so you're saying crime is lower in Judea and Samaria than other parts of Israel?
Yes.
That's
significantly lower. It's actually the most peaceful community in the country.
That's unreal.
The opposite.
And really a blessing to be a part of this people, amazing people, God-fearing people for the majority. My question to you is so why? Why would an international body, the UN, that has some respect on the world stage, little now, but some countries really hold it, some Americans even say, well, it's a respected body. You have to take note. Why would the UN, of all entities, pick out Israel and do such an incredibly biased work to delegitimize the people of Judea and Samaria? The facts that you've just shared are just polar opposite of the truth. Why?
They don't like us.
Yeah.
This might be a news flash. But
maybe that sounds a little obvious. Everybody should know why. Obvious. But there's got to be, what's the sinister reason?
This campaign, the settler violence narrative, isn't new. It burst onto the scene perhaps with more force over the past 2 years, 3 years.
And it's not only the UN.
Not only the UN, but it's a campaign that has been in the works for close to 2 decades. In 2016, the European Union began to fund some very, very specific nonprofits. Going back to what you opened with, there are all sorts of organizations, supposedly civil society organizations, floating around Judea and Samaria that are anti-Israel. They were created for this purpose. They were funded for this purpose. They carry out their job very, very efficiently, and it's a vicious circle. So what you'll see is, for example, if you go onto the B'Tselem website, they gave the title for this settler violence campaign years ago. It's not new. And look at their page, and what it's called is Settler Violence Equals State Violence. By undermining the legitimacy of the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, you clear the way for creating a Palestinian state. And you undermine the settlers and connect them in all sorts of ways to the IDF, you essentially tarnish the moral standing of Israel's army and, as a result, of the entire Jewish state. You cast a shadow of illegitimacy, of violence, of oppression on the entire state of Israel, starting with the weakest link. And that is really what has been targeted all along. That has been the goal of this campaign from the very start. Settler violence equals state violence. If you delegitimize the Jewish presence in Judea and Samaria, you connect that with the IDF that essentially carries out this program, then you undermine the moral underpinnings of the IDF and the state of Israel as a whole. And that has been the purpose from the very, very beginning. And unfortunately, the impact of this campaign, as we've seen, has actually cost lives of Israelis all over the country. Arms embargoes in a time of war based on this, sanctions against the Israeli government and members of the and ministers in the Israeli government based on this false narrative are precisely what this was engineered to do, and it's doing it.
And if I mean, it's not just one NGO, but we're talking over 100 probably,
Yes.
And a lot of funding funding put into campaigns to paint the settlers as violent and radical and extremist, right?
Correct.
Like massive funding, talking tens of millions of dollars.
Tens of millions of dollars.
Are the Israeli public aware of this?
Mostly not.
Yeah.
Unfortunately not. Also, those who are not aware how much of this is an echo chamber. Mm-hmm. Because when you hear, for example, I'll give you one of the more popular anti-Israel NGOs. It's called Rabbis for Human Rights. Yeah. Rabbis for Human Rights has a life of its own, but the head of Rabbis for Human Rights, since he founded Rabbis for Human Rights, has also founded at least 3 other NGOs. And they all essentially, so you think, oh, there's this one, and there's that one, and there's the other one, and there's Tru'ah, and there's all kinds of things, and there's Protecting the Olive Harvest. It's all the same 4 people. And they pay people to come and live in these illegal outposts in Judea and Samaria to create confrontations with the Jewish communities. And we see them out in the field all the time.
We've met these guys.
We've had encounters
run
with
into
this
them
very
before.
individual you're talking about, name not worth mentioning.
Yeah.
But literally attacked.
Yeah.
Like we were out on a Jewish farm, clearly, Area C, clearly a Jewish farm.
Right.
This individual, this is what they do constantly. They go and they grab Arabs, and literally it's hysterical, the encounter I had with this deal, because the Arabs were like, no, it's not our farm, it's the Jewish guy's farm. And he has to incite them.
Correct.
And then
scream in our faces.
and
Correct.
yell. And then the fact is, and here's the terrible thing, that they know they can be successful even if the Arabs are against them. Like these Arabs are like, no, these are the Jewish farm. We want to live peacefully here. Literally, this was the encounter we had. And as soon as the IDF has to show up, he created the instance that he needed, and those farms' olives were lost that year.
Correct.
Because then there's an incident, and the IDF has to say, close zone.
Correct.
This is dangerous now.
And they win. It's a win-win for them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this campaign resulted in, for example, it started off with what they called the documentation project. These NGOs were provided funding. They handed out cameras, and they put people in all these illegal outposts literally on the back fences of Jewish communities all over Judea and Samaria. They provoke confrontations, and then they know exactly when to start the film rolling.
That's right.
And then they edit and they curate really all sorts of images. It's unbelievable how much damage you can do if you selectively edit and selectively film these things, string them all together, and it looks very bad. But the truth of the matter is that when you check the incident reports, it's very clear that this was staged confrontations. You see the same faces in them over and over. You see some of the same.
It's full-time jobs.
And some of them, they're paid. They are paid, and they'll admit it. And we have lots of footage of these victims, quote unquote, saying that they've been paid to be where they are and to do what they're doing. It's time for the state of Israel to, and thankfully, recently, they've begun deporting some of the foreign agitators who are
About time.
It's about time. And
Something tells me we could,
any normal country would have done it years
a long
ago.
time ago. Yeah. Something tells me we could go for 2 hours talking about.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else really big from this report, specifically on the topic of settler violence, that people should be aware of?
I'll put it this way. One of the big things was, I think for your audience, it's very important to understand the Biden administration sanctioned Israelis, individuals, civil society organizations, and the state of Israel as a whole as a result of this narrative. The important thing to understand is that the reason those sanctions were imposed was by executive order. The president has that power in a state of emergency. So President Biden declared that the rising violence, of which there is no evidence, in Judea and Samaria was posing a threat to the United States of America and its personnel and its interests in the Middle East, and therefore imposed these sanctions. The implication of these kinds of sanctions is that Israel's judiciary and Israel as a democracy is faltering, is not dealing with this issue head on. That is an affront to essentially the underpinnings of the state of Israel as a democracy. And that is something that the government of Israel should never have allowed to happen. To say that the United States government has to impose sanctions because Israel's enforcement and judicial systems are not functioning or are complicit in violence, nationalist, racist types of violence, is an affront to every single one of us. And it's an affront to the very special relationship between Israel and the United States. And it is an affront to everything that people who cherish freedom and democracy should make everyone stand up and say, this should never be allowed to happen again. So Regavim is part of a suit in U.S. federal court, suing to ensure that these sorts of workarounds that are undermining Israel's democratic process don't happen again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we know farmers that were literally sanctioned under these things.
Right.
A farmer sanctioned. For me as a Tennessee farmer, I that makes me cringe. The American government is reaching out into another country to sanction a farmer. I mean, that was how terrible what you just described went down. I guess to sum this up, and for my thoughts, Luke, is like, what is all this about? Is the nations around, whether it be the UN or these NGOs that are trying to fund and delegitimize Israel, why are they trying to do that? They're trying to, now more than ever, because Jewish people have come back to their ancestral homeland, specifically in the areas of Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem. And those are key areas that they would like to create the 22nd Arab state in. And they've got agreement around the world to create a 22nd Arab state and to delegitimize the only one and only Jewish state. So that's very clear that they're hostile to the nation of Israel. They want to delegitimize the nation of Israel. They really have agreed with Arab ideology that Israel should not be. It's just a matter of time. And this is joining the war against Israel to obliterate Israel. It's really aligned with an Iranian kind of mindset of just let's get the Jewish thing over with. And unfortunately, these Western thinkers, people are being duped by some politics in the Arab world that delegitimize the state of Israel. So I think all of this, as we boil it down, is really about Judea and Samaria and Israel expanding and recognizing Jewish rights in their ancestral homeland.
I'll add one thing to that.
Yeah.
I think it's part of the bigger picture. I think it's part of this woke ideology and a part of the postmodernism that has confused so many people in the West. Israel stands for pretty much every single thing that they hate, and particularly the people of Judea and Samaria, because these are people of faith. These are people who are connected to history. These are families. These are people who are connected to the land. They're connected to both the past and the future through a very particular vision that is family-based, that is nation-based, that is faith-based. And they can't stand that. And that's really what's powering all of this. We are a thorn in their side. They'd rather us just be gone. We're not willing.
That's right.
Thank God.
You heard it here, folks. There is no such thing as settler violence, and you can read this report for yourself. I'll put the link in the description so people can download. There's a PDF, 125 pages, right? I mean, you can get into the data, and it's all there, and it tells a very different story than everything you've seen and everything you've heard. Also, we'll put a link to Regavim's website, because you guys, like, this is one topic in one area of expertise, and you guys do this in so many other areas.
Nice.
And when people see lies and propaganda and fake news in the media about Israel, like, Regavim is a great place to turn for the truth of what's really happening. So, Naomi Kahn, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for bringing the truth and clarity to this very important topic. Guys, when you hear about settler violence, just know that there's a different story, a very different picture going on. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.